We begin the news in West Africa, where the burial ceremony of 17 army personnel killed in Okwama community, Delta State, southern Nigeria, has been scheduled for Wednesday. Army spokesperson Major General Onyema Nwachukwu announced this in a statement on Tuesday. He said President Bola Tinubu would be the special guest of honor at the event. According to Nwachukwu, the remains of the personnel will be laid to rest at about 3 p.m. at the National Cemetery in Abuja. Meanwhile, some leaders of the Niger Delta have pleaded with President Tinubu to allow the people of Okwama in Ughelli South local government area, Delta State, who fled their homes about 12 days ago following the siege to the community by the Nigerian army over the killing of 17 soldiers, to return home and pick the pieces of their lives. Similarly, elder statesman Edwin Clark has warned against a repeated invasion of his property in Delta State by personnel of the Nigerian military and the Nigerian police, saying these are acts of provocation. Clark, while speaking to newsmen in Abuja, while admitting that the military has tendered an apology, says that those responsible should be warned to desist from such actions in the future and exercise decorum and the rule of law in carrying out their responsibilities. He says due notification should be given before any unprovoked barge into his property, as he is willing to cooperate with security agencies irrespective of whatever information they intend to investigate.
The army has apologized to me. He's a general in charge of South and some other places. I was satisfied, and I'm still satisfied. But I brought it to the notice that I do not want this to happen again, whereby the mistakes are coming up and down. Police came into my house. They said they missed their way, or I don't know what happened. The baggy people said they were putting ammunition. Delta boys from the Niger Delta were bringing ammunition to my house through the SAW 1 truck, Hilux, filled with guns and so on, and it was passing through a taxi. All those were bunkum. What am I saying? Give me peace of mind. I will still contribute to the welfare of Nigeria. That's all what I want. My message is that, why this coincidence? Why was some inquiry not made having regard to a man like me? If you found a devilish fellow, a murderer in my house, it's a bad thing. So why do you want to implicate me before you tell my governor? By taking me by surprise. That's my anger, that's my worries. But I'm forgiving all that, because what is important now, let us nip this thing on the bud. Otherwise it will escalate. I've told you how they attack my house. It will be another person, there will be problems.
3 days after the rescue of children abducted from Kuriga Primary and Junior Secondary School in Kaduna State, parents are yet to reunite with their children. Now, since the announcement of their return, parents of the freed school children have been eager to receive them back home in the village. The children were abducted on March 7, 2024, after bandits invaded their school located in Kuriga village of Chikun local government area of Kaduna State. The school children were reportedly rescued on Sunday, March 24th, after 16 days in captivity. The military handed over the 131 rescued children to Kaduna State Governor Senator Uba Sani on Monday, and said 6 of the students who were hospitalized would be handed over to the state as soon as the doctors certify them fit. We'll have our correspondent Marvelous Obommanu in our subsequent bulletin. Now, still on security, the Nigerian army has released over 300 individuals who have been detained at Giwa Barracks in Borno State for suspected links with Boko Haram insurgents. News Central's correspondent Umaru Kirawa reports that the suspects were cleared of any connection to Boko Haram after years of investigation. The military is said to have handed over the detainees, including men, women, and children, to Borno State government for proper reintegration into society. Away from security now, pro-democracy group, the Kimpact Development Initiative, has called for the prosecution of perpetrators of violence in the 2023 Bayelsa, Imo and Kogi off-cycle elections. The initiative made this known during the public presentation of its election violence and education report, which says that the report about 50 incidents of violence were recorded with 4 fatalities in 3 states. Our correspondent, Idong Joseph, reports.
The activities of secessionist groups in Nigeria's southeast, militant groups in the Niger Delta, and ethnic politics are issues believed to have fueled violence in the 2023 off-cycle governorship elections in Bayelsa, Imo and Kogi states. Election monitoring group, the Kimpact Development Initiative, while revealing findings on its efforts during the recent off-cycle elections, says that the level of violence witnessed during the polls calls for stakeholders in the country to properly understand the trend of election violence in an effort to prevent future occurrence.
So we started tracking 6 months to that election to see the environment, the actors, and what could actually contribute to peaceful elections. So we started tracking issue of electoral violence. But it's so interesting our finding, which we presented today. We found out that look, there are dynamics different in each of the 3 states.
Election does not happen in silos, right? Election happen within an environment. So the regional conflict dynamics in each of the region which the election is happening contributed to a whole lot of the nature of the election in the state.
The initiative says that while the deployment of large security personnel during the polls was expected to ensure a safer voting process, there were reports of compromised security personnel engaging in acts of violence or failing to prevent same.
Perpetrators of electoral violence are been going free, and that is why they come back to do the same thing again. So our recommendation is that they must be brought to book, they must be prosecuted, they must be charged, and they must be tried. So, and again, we are also asking for clarity within clarity of legislative framework about who arrests and who prosecutes.
Most of the problem we encountered or most of the violence we track emanated from the resentment that came from the political party primaries. So, and I think internal dispute resolution of political parties needs to be strengthened.
The initiative also highlighted voter suppression, voter harassment, and the attitude of politicians attempting to win by all means as issues of threats to future polls. Stakeholders says this needs to be curbed to ensure a more peaceful election in the future. In Abuja for News Central, I am Idong Joseph.
Now we're going back to insecurity, talking about Nigerian insurgency, where army have actually freed over 300 detainees cleared of ties with Boko Haram. And at the moment, we have joining me on the news to discuss the issue, a public affairs analyst, Nasiru Wasagu. Hello, Nasiru. Thank you so much for joining me at this time.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
All right, good morning, Nasiru. So there actually have been scenarios in history where people go undercover and act contrary to their real purpose. Now, 230 people have actually been cleared after it was established that they're not terrorists, but they were conscripted against their will. Is it truly possible to establish this 100%? Aren't we taking a risk here with this? I mean, freeing them?
Well, yeah, thank you. I think everywhere that there is war, you have prisoners of war that get reintegrated into the society in some sort of a process. However, what you just said now, that people undercover or somewhere actually, that is very true, but most of these that are being released today, that have been released, a lot of them were arrested after a raid by the army, and some communities. If you look at some of these insurgents were carrying out some sort of a guerrilla warfare, where they will hide in communities and just bring out an attack on the military formations. So when the military come in for the rights of those communities, they actually wouldn't know who is who. They will ask everyone is within the vicinity under the suspicion that members of Boko Haram, that is, so they must be conscripted on.
All right, we actually seem to be having issues with your audio, but thank you so much, Nasiru, for joining me. We'll try to reconnect with you a bit later. All right, moving on from that, Mrs. Rekiat Momo has been appointed acting CEO of Eco Electricity Distribution Company, that's Eco Disco. This was contained in a statement signed by the board of Eco Electricity Distribution PLC, dated March 26, 2024. Now, this follows the redeployment of erstwhile MD CEO Mrs. Tinuade Sanda back to WPG Limited, the core investor who seconded her to Eco Disco. Momo has been in the power sector for more than 31 years and rose through the ranks from the days of NEPA, PHCN, and now Eco Disco. A marketing professional by training, she holds an MBA from Lagos State University. To successfully realize the visions and projects of any government, there must be proper budgeting, financing, and implementation. The unavailability of funds to finance any budget will naturally make the budget useless. Now, in this report, News Central's Chinwe Ugele examines the 2024 Abia State budget and the sources of financing it. Take a listen.
2024 Abia State Appropriation Bill of 567.2 billion naira. It was stated that the budget will be funded through federal allocations, internally generated revenue, as well as domestic and foreign borrowings. The state government has already embarked on some capital projects, which, according to Governor Alex Otti, would be funded by about 85% loans. The state's internally generated revenue as of December 2023 was around 23 billion naira. Although traders in the state are still enjoying tax holidays since the present government came on board, the monthly internally generated revenue is now put at 2 billion naira.
Now that we had given our people that reprieve, that initial reprieve, to enable them recover from the pains of years of suffering and exploitation and intimidation, we have gradually started the process of collecting taxes. But in the next few months, we begin to define our position to become clearer.
The magnitude of projects embarked upon by the state government, suggesting Wosu, a chartered accountant, says borrowing is inevitable.
You need to now, when you look at your data, and you find that those other sources of income are not able to carry out those projects and the things you have. The resources are not there to be able to do it. So what you do is you go take the other option of borrowing. And borrowing sometimes is good, but sometimes it is misplaced. For instance, if you borrow for a current expenditure, it's a waste. But if you borrow for capital projects, then it's like setting up something that is enduring.
As a financial person, so he understands the application and utilization of loans. So we are not careless about it, and whatever we are taking, we are going to ensure that it is properly utilized for the development of the state.
He also said government needs to state repayment plans in the budget to create a clear understanding for successive governments.
So something must be done. The payment must be made. The proper provision will have to be made in the budget to service those debts.
The masses would not complain about loans if at the end of the day, the government is able to account for the money borrowed by tying them to people-oriented projects. In Omaha for News Central, Chinwe Ugele.
Thank you, Chinwe, for that report. Now, Nigerians have continued to react to the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's call to the citizens to buy goods made in the country. While the presidency seeks to strengthen the local currency and boost the Nigerian economy with this directive, News Central's Perpetua Fasomi Peter spoke to Nigerians to know what their preferences are and the factors responsible for their choices.
In a bid to sustain the gains recorded in the foreign exchange market, the presidency has urged Nigerians to buy made-in-Nigeria products. I'm here on the streets to find out what Nigerians think about this.
The majority of the product they produce in Nigeria, most of them are fake, but I prefer imported goods than the Nigerian ones.
I prefer imported goods because what they do is is very neat than Nigerian production.
Nigeria here, like we used to compromise. We compromise with our products. Let the standard organization take care of the issue on ground.
Quality, price, and distrust are some of the factors highlighted here. But what do players in the manufacturing industry have to say about this?
By the time we continue to import, we will continue to have inflation because there will be more stress on the naira. Yes, there will be challenges here and there, but to me, those are pockets of challenges. If you look at some of the products coming out from Nigeria, you'll be marveled. You wonder if this is actually from Nigeria.
What more can the government do? Not just to encourage Nigerians to buy made-in-Nigeria goods, but to also address the nation's major foreign exchange challenge, foreign currency illiquidity.
One way government can do that is to increase the ease of doing business. Government must be intentional about making funds accessible and affordable to business owners. As manufacturers or producers in Nigeria, we must also learn to begin to do backward integration. So government must be able to address the issue of power, make power accessible to almost everybody, and make it affordable also.
The gains recorded in the foreign exchange market in the past few days is nothing short of commendable. However, to sustain this, the fiscal authority must also rise to the occasion and do what it must to encourage local production and reduce pressure on the nation's currency, Naira. In Lagos, for News Central, Perpetua Fasami Peter.
All right, away from that, about 5 million people are currently in dire need of clean and potable water in Nigeria's northeast. Northeast Nigeria Wash Sector Coordinator Francois Bell made this known when stakeholders in the water, sanitation and hygiene sector in northeast Nigeria gathered to join forces to tackle the prevailing water crisis in the region. News Central's Umari Kirawa completes the report.
Access to clean and potable water remains a major issue of concern in most communities in northeast Nigeria. As the water crisis in the northeast continues to persist, the government and humanitarian actors in the wash sector gather to discuss strategies for a better way forward.
In northeast Nigeria, 5 million people are still in need of water, sanitation, hygiene. So many, as you know, IDPs, but also returnees and host communities. Water, no get enemy, water beyond the borders.
We see this a lot when I see long queues of people in IDP camp setting where there's not enough water and people have to queue up and conflict breaks out. This is not something that we want to see, and UNICEF want to work very closely and will continue to work very closely with the governments, with the communities, with other stakeholders to make sure that we have adequate, safe, clean water for every girl, every boy, every man and every woman.
The government of Nigeria is said to be implementing a multifaceted approach to provide sustainable access to potable water in the northeast region. The authorities say they have recognized the urgency of the situation and are working closely with various stakeholders to ensure effective and coordinated efforts.
We, Borno State House of Assembly, have legislated and the budget that has been passed, which we appropriated some good amounts of funds to achieve good water supply to the people of Borno State, which is very significant and also key in transformation agenda of our Executive Governor of Borno State, Professor Engineer Babagana Umar Azolom.
There need to be an awareness for the public, and government should stand up to put regulatory bodies in place to take that responsibility.
Stakeholders, including government agencies like Borno State Rural Water Supply and Sanitation Agency, Non-profit organizations and international partners have committed to enhancing water management practices, delivering efficient sanitation services, and promoting hygiene education in the region. In Maiduguri for News Central, Umaru Kirawa.
The disregard for freedom of the press is said to be a disregard for human rights, dissenting voices, and an absolute disregard for the civic space. The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, organized a public discourse to promote respect for media freedom and the right to freedom of expression in Nigeria. News Central's Omolola Ololade has more in this report.
In 2021, the Nigerian government clamped down on free social networking site Twitter, now known as X, an act many referred to as a threat to freedom of expression and a violation of human rights. It is on this premise that the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, organized an interactive session with different stakeholders such as media practitioners, lawyers, civil society organizations, and government institutions to discuss the increasing level of media repression and freedom of expression in Nigeria.
Conversation is important to drive conversations around freedom of expression, where we are, and most importantly, where we should be, and then commitments from people, individuals, both on the citizen side of the divide and for public institutions to do better going forward.
While civil society organizations and relevant stakeholders believe that the shrinking civic space, particularly the harassment of journalists, was making it harder for citizens to put checks and balances on the government. Lawmakers say government institutions are doing all they can to protect laws and policies protecting journalists.
A whole lot that civil society can do and media, especially in helping to amplify all it is that we're doing within the House. There's also a whole lot that they can also benefit from engaging with us, particularly to get insights, of some of the challenges that we see from the inside and how we can work together to be able to make those amendments.
Experts believe despite legislative restrictions, government control over Nigeria's media has persisted over the years, and the government must do all it can to change the narrative.
As a matter of fact, Section 22 of the Constitution puts that duty on the media to get information for the people. So the right to have access to the information is being jeopardized by gagging the press and, of course, by restricting the civic space.
We should try and ensure that we don't restrict the civic space, because it is a place where you have an amalgamation of ideas. And we should sieve it and take the best that can help our leaders to be more accountable and to make our leaders to be a hearing leadership.
While Nigeria may compare well against other African countries in the area of media repression and freedom of expression, more still needs to be done to ensure the media is free from all forms of right violations. In Lagos for News Central, Omolola Ololade.
The news continues in West Africa, where Mali's ruling junta has banned the activities of a rare new opposition coalition in Bamako, citing threats of disturbance to public order. The country has been under military rule since back-to-back coups in 2020 and 2021, with the security situation compounded by humanitarian and political crisis. The coalition, named Action Synergy for Mali, was set up in February and is made up of 30 opposition parties, including supporters of an influential imam, Mahmoud Dicko. Now, the group is highly critical of the junta and proposed a new way for Malians who have seen the country ravaged by different groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group since 2012. The observation missions deployed to Senegal by the European Union and West Africa's regional bloc has praised the smooth running of the presidential election won by an anti-establishment opposition after 3 years of unrest. Around 7.3 million Senegalese were eligible to take part in Sunday's vote, which saw 44-year-old Bassirou Diomaye Faye elected as the youngest president in the country's history. Official provisional results are due to be published this week, but Faye's opponents in the race, Amadou Ba and outgoing President Macky Sall, have already acknowledged his victory. Now, the head of the EU mission, Malin Bjork, described it as a well-organized and open election that demonstrated the strength of Senegal's democratic institutions.
While welcoming the remarkably peaceful and inclusive outcomes of the electoral process, the ECOWAS Election Observer Mission wishes to note certain processes and practices that will require reviews to further strengthen the electoral framework. The ECOWAS Election Observation Mission welcomes the gracious gestures of the government's official candidate Amadou Ba, and the outgoing president, His Excellency Macky Sall, who both congratulated the president-elect Bassirou Diomaye Faye even before the official declaration of presidential preliminary results. This contributed to further.
We now head to southern Africa, where heavy rainfall has caused floods in parts of Mozambique's capital Maputo and surrounding province, disrupting activities. Now, the flood waters reportedly blocked access to banks and other institutions in Maputo, inundated several local houses, and impeded traffic on various streets. Residents of Guachena neighborhood in Katembe say they're suffering with no help in sight.
Por que o governo está nos vendo a sofrer nós? Por que não está a apoiar nós? Não queremos dinheiro dele, dá que ter cada uma pessoa tem terreno dele, vai fazer casa dele de caniço, ou talvez mais estando distância daqui. É o segundo ano, estamos a sofrer. Não temos alguém para nos apoiar, estamos nos vendo, estamos a sofrer. Nem para nós termos, se para nós cozinhar, não estamos a ter.
Água rodeou a minha cama. Mas já saiu. Onde eu dormo é aqui. Roupa tirei lá, pus aqui em cima da mesa. E as panelas também ficam aqui em cima da mesa. Eu ia pedir ajuda, mas como que não tenho alguém para me ajudar? Não há como, só viver aqui mesmo.
Now let's head to East Africa, where Kenyan authorities have released the bodies of victims of a doomsday starvation called to disrupt relatives almost a year since the discovery of mass graves in a grisly case that shocked the world. They are the first bodies to be handed over to their relatives for burial after months of painstaking work to identify them using DNA. Self-proclaimed pastor Paul Ntenge Mackenzie is alleged to have incited his followers to starve to death in order to meet Jesus. So far, 34 of the 429 bodies exhumed between April and October last year have been positively identified.
It has been a very tough journey from last year up to now, a very tough one. Fortunately, I'm happy that I've got the loved ones. Now we are preparing to go and bury so that now we can start another journey of forgetting about this and do some other things, because surely it has taken a bit long. We lost 8 members. We have just got we were supposed to get 5. That is my daughter, the brother to her husband, her mother-in-law, and 2 of her children. But we've been told that one of the children did not match the DNA, so now we've been given only 4. So we are still hoping that perhaps in the near future we are going to get the other 4.
So the process, we must say, has happened very, very well. But we as a commission would like to say that the process is rather...
In North Africa, 4 people have been sentenced to death and 2 given life imprisonment over the assassination of Tunisian opposition leader Chokri Belaid in 2013. Now, this was announced by the Deputy Public Prosecutor of the Anti-Terrorist Judicial Division on Wednesday. A total of 23 people had been charged in connection with the murder of leftist Belaid a fierce critic of the then ruling Islamist party Ennahda in his car outside his home. Sentences ranging from 2 to 120 years were handed down to other defendants, while 5 were acquitted. Thank you for staying with us. Now, Colombia's military has launched an offensive in the southwest following a partial truce suspension with the Central General Staff EMC rebel group. The commander of military forces, Helder Giraldo, said the operation resulted in arrests, deaths, and recovery of minors forcibly recruited by criminal organizations.
Que hay una acción persistente de parte de las fuerzas militares contra el Estado Mayor Central, no solo en la confrontación directa en los 3 departamentos, sino también cuando necesidad de intervención del ejército se produce una confrontación, el ejército ha sostenido igualmente esos enfrentamientos con el Estado Mayor Central. Las acciones que tienen que desarrollarse contra la minería ilegal, contra el narcotráfico, que se siguen incrementando y que consideramos en la medida en que sean más contundentes, han tenido resultados importantes, pero en la medida en que sean más contundentes, debilitan.
Authorities have suspended their search for 6 people missing after a packed cargo ship slammed into a Baltimore bridge, causing it to collapse and block one of the busiest U.S. commercial harbors. U.S. Coast Guard Rear Admiral Shannon Gillett told a press conference at night as night fell that the temperatures and currents were making it difficult for divers to continue working underwater, but the boats will continue patrolling. All 6 people were members of a nighttime construction crew who were repairing potholes on the Francis Scott Key Bridge when disaster struck not long after midnight.
I'd like to announce tonight that based on the length of time that we've gone in this search, the extensive search efforts that we've put into it, the water temperature, that at this point we do not believe that we're going to find any of these individuals still alive. And so this evening at around 7:30, we are going to suspend the active search and rescue efforts. Coast Guard's not going away, none of our partners are going away, but we're just going to transition to a different phase. And so
at this point, as the Admiral said, we're going away from the search and rescue portion to a recovery operation. The changing conditions out there have made it dangerous for the first responders, the divers in the water. We will still have surface ships out overnight. At 0600 hours tomorrow, we're hoping to put divers in the water and begin a more detailed search to do our very best to recover those 6 missing.
In business, the Central Bank of Nigeria has increased the monetary policy rate by 200 basis points to 24.75% from 22.75% to address escalating inflation. Governor Olayemi Cardoso announced the decision at the 294th meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee press briefing in Abuja. This marks a 2% surge from the previous rate set a month earlier, constituting a second hike under the current committee's tenure. The CBN governor had mentioned the exchange rate, adding that the Apex Bank will ensure that the market remains flexible.
Exchange. We believe that we are on the right course, and of course, one particular area of chair as a result of the actions we have taken is the moderation in the foreign exchange rate, which you have seen. Now, don't take the foreign exchange in isolation because it does have major pass-through to inflation. And to the extent that we've seen this happen, and we expect it will continue to moderate, we are confident that these tools and measures that the central bank is using will ensure that, the inflationary spiral will gradually.
Now, to further discuss this, I'm joined by Managing Director, Trust Bank Asset Management Limited, Aziz Lawal. Hello, Aziz. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, now talking about this, 200 basis points, that's just about a month after an initial 400 basis points increase. How did that come to you? Did you expect it?
Yeah, thank you once again. Yeah, I mean, there were expectations around hike, right? Even though there were also some analysts that felt that, I mean, particularly from the private sector, right, who felt at these levels that the CBN should hold rates. But for those that anticipated that there was going to be hike, I mean, the popular projection was max 100 basis points or 150 basis points. But coming at this level of 200 basis points, it was not very popular, but though generally, particularly from the financial service side, and there was a general expectation that the CBN was going to hike, but not at these levels. Thank you.
All right, now talking about it, not being popular, that's the increase not being popular. While many economists and analysts have actually condemned the hike, saying it stifles businesses, the CBN actually sees it as a trade-off, maintaining that its core mandate comes first. What do you make of the CBN stance?
I mean, yeah, thank you. I mean, the CBN stance, I mean, like you rightly said, it appears to, like, let's prioritize our core mandate, which is to maintain price stability, which includes also controlling inflation over other considerations such as stimulating economic growth and, of course, the private sector. This approach is not, though the approach the CBN is taking is not uncommon among central banks, especially when faced with inflationary pressures like we currently experiencing in Nigeria. Like I said, while some analysts may criticize the rate hike, again, it could potentially stifle businesses and economic activity. And the CBN seems to view it as a necessary trade-off, like you correctly mentioned, right? Particularly when it's now clear that what they have done in the past, particularly starting from the for the first MPC for the year last month, right? We've seen that over time, the higher interest rate has attracted enough foreign portfolio investors, right? We're providing enough liquidity for the CBN to intervene in the market. So to a reasonable extent, we've seen that, I mean, the Naira is now relatively stable compared to what we saw at the start of the year. Particularly in the last couple of weeks, we've seen the Naira do over 10% in terms of appreciation, right? So yeah, so like, I mean, it's a necessary stance, right? Even in context, if you compare Nigeria to a very close competitor at this time, right? You see that Egypt, early in March, they raised their benchmark rate by 600 basis points, right? Coincidentally, CBN is also, Nigeria CBN is also matching that level by additionally hiking rate by 200 basis points. What is Egypt's inflation? Egypt's inflation currently is about 35.7%. Nigeria's inflation is 31.7 currently, expected to go to 32 or 33 levels in March, right? You look at Egypt's benchmark rates, currently 27.25, and Nigeria currently at 24.75%. So that speaks to the fact that it's not uncommon among central banks to keep this stance at faced with current inflation challenges. Thank you.
Okay, now away from the stance, the CBN stance, Aziz, let's look at the asymmetric corridor and cash reserve ratio of merchant banks, which were also adjusted. What is the implication of these decisions, and what do they portend for the people?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for merchant banks, that was taken to 14%. I mean, currently merchant banking is currently plagued with liquidity challenges. This is expected to worsen the situation, right? As for commercial banks, right, the corridor for commercial banks, the fact that it was returned to the status quo, right, compared to the last one that had a minus 700, right, which tend to put more pressure on the banking system at that level. But the fact that the plus 100 minus 300 is definitely a better condition for commercial banking, right? Unlike merchant banks. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Aziz Lawal, for joining me and speaking on this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Now, in the world of sports, the Eagles of Mali defeated Nigeria's Super Eagles 2-0 in a friendly match in Marrakesh, Morocco on Tuesday night. Goals in each half by El Bilal Toure and Kamoru Doumbia sealed the win for Mali. Now, the last time Mali defeated the Super Eagles was on 5th September 1975, also in a friendly which ended 4-1. Prior to Tuesday's game, the Eagles were unbeaten in 8 straight fixtures against the Malians, recording 5 wins and 3 draws. Interim coach Finidi George gave starting shirts to Jamilu Collins, Raphael Onyedika, and Kenneth Omeruo. The trio replaced Bruno Onyemechi, Frank Onyeka, and Benjamin Tanimu, who all featured in the 2-1 win against Ghana on Friday. This loss was the interim coach's first at the helms of affairs following the expiration of Jose Pesero's contract, as well as when he won his first game in charge, a friendly on Friday against the Black Stars of Ghana. Up next for the Eagles is the 2026 World Cup qualifiers against South Africa in June, which Super Eagles stand-in captain Kenneth Omeruo promised better results.
I think we played better second half. Overall it wasn't a bad game. We just didn't take our chances and we conceded, two goals. Overall, I think we played a good game. It's good. It's fantastic. I will not talk about the players that are not here, but at least we could play, good football between ourselves and.
And that's all at this hour. But before we go, let's take another look at some of our top stories. We told you that Nigeria's President Tinubu to attend burial of slain soldiers. We also told you that elder statesman Edwin Clark describes military's invasion of premises as act of provocation. And finally, you heard that EU ECOWAS hails smooth running of Senegal presidential poll. Send your eyewitness reports to the WhatsApp number on the screen. Do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Darshan Usman.